part of your e-discovery process, from legal hold through case construction. It enables case teams to handle the largest, most complex review projects using flexible, customizable workflows and powerful searching and visualization capabilities, all in a highly scalable environment. Additionally, we've built seamless integrations across our end-to-end stack to increase your speed to review and speed to production. A few other notes about Relativity: it uses a zero-footprint viewer, so it is compatible with multiple browser types and operating systems, including Macs. In addition to strong authentication and password requirements, Relativity retains strong security by enabling you to lock down reviewers by IP address. So if you have contract reviewers who should only be able to hit Relativity on site, but you also have partners who want to be able to hit Relativity anywhere they have an internet connection, we can provide that level of security. So I'm going to be logging into Relativity as a power user, and that's going to have a lot of bells and whistles turned on. But I'll be demoing a lot of end-user functionality first, looking at native files, coding them, redacting, tagging, and some data analysis and searching as well. And then at the end, I'll go back in as a more basic reviewer to show how Relativity can really slim down to meet the needs of contract reviewers or basic reviewers. So first I'm going to log into Relativity as Reviewer 1. And when I log into Relativity, I'm presented with a workspace list, or a list of all the repositories a user has access to. The security model in Relativity is highly granular, so we can grant and deny rights to users and groups from anything as large as a case and all the documents within it, to something as small as an individual document, a field of coding data or metadata about that document, annotation layers or redactions on a document, or even features of the application. Note that there's no administrative and end-user interfaces in Relativity. It's one seamless application, and we simply grant and deny permissions to our users based on what they need to be efficient in the system and do their job. For instance, you have the ability to add new coding forms or new options to coding forms. You can run productions within Relativity, even if you're using Relativity through a hosted instance, and this gives you the same level of control that traditionally you'd only have from within an in-house installation. So I'm going to log into our salt versus pepper demo case. Relativity employs a tab-based metaphor to organize the different sections of the application. And by default, I'm bounced into the Documents tab because this is where a bulk of our review will occur. Now, if I had access to more administrative features, they would show across the top here. However, if I don't have access to those, they will disappear from context entirely, and I won't even be aware that they exist. This is a persistent idea within Relativity that when a user doesn't have permissions to something, we're not going to show them grayed out options. Instead, we're just going to remove the option entirely so they're not even aware it exists. We find that you can have new reviewers up and productive using Relativity in as little as 10 or 15 minutes of training by presenting them with only the options they need to be efficient and do their jobs. Browsers first. The first thing you're going to notice is your list of documents here. And if you're familiar with Relativity, this may be a recognizable interface. In addition to this document list, we've also introduced visualizations, which allow you to interact with and make sense of your data in ways not possible with a traditional review interface. Now, depending on their role, users might interact with their data in different ways and can choose to set up dashboards with widgets that give them a view that is customized to their workflow. So if I'm a senior associate, I'm going to be concerned with the key issues in my case. So I can set up a dashboard to show some of the important keywords and some of the documents and custodians in my case. Now, if I'm a project manager, I'm probably going to be curious about my reviewer progress. So I can set up a dashboard that tells me information about my reviewers and how they're coding documents. So if I go back to my document list, there are a lot of ways to drill down on the data you need, from different searching options to the visualizations. Before we go into workflow, let's start with Relativity's browsers. So we have our case folders, our field tree, advanced and saved searches, and then also our clustering feature, which is a part of the analytics feature set. So we have some high-level folders here in case folders. You'll notice this padlock here that lets me know this folder is secured, and all these folders are securable. We have some different file servers that are separated by city and share, and then we also have our custodians. If we select John Arnold, we have his loose files, which are things that probably were sitting around on his desktop, and then we also have his email structure, and this is the original structure of his Outlook or Lotus Notes, whatever he was using at the time. And let's say we were discussing an issue that had to do with Compact. We can click on his Compact folder, and we have all of the documents the way he was storing them. So this gives me a very intuitive way to browse through these records. And in terms of how we set this up, Relativity can map to any piece of metadata in the load files. So in this case, we just map the file path information, and we have the file path automatically recreated based on that. Another popular way our clients are using this is maybe this was originally a paper-based collection, and these documents were coded on the box level. So maybe we want to recreate that box structure. Other than that, we can go ahead and right-click and create folders as we see fit. So that's case folders. Next up, we have field tree. And field tree is a metaphor for the tagging and coding structure inside of Relativity, and it's a very intuitive way to browse through records as well. So for instance, maybe we're looking at deposition kits, and we're taking a look at Elliot's. With Elliot's kit, we can see that he has 8,087 items. But at this point in the review, we're really only curious about items that have been tagged as privileged so far. So I can select our privilege tag, and we can see that we only have 73 items here. So as documents are tagged, the next time I click on this, they're going to be instantly returned. And that is field tree. Now I'm going to hide the browser to give us more screen real estate as we talk a little bit about our workflow and touch on reporting. So at the bottom right, you'll notice that we have a little over 77,000 records, and this is the entire database at Enron. While the 77,000 records we have is certainly a healthy-sized database, the largest case in Relativity has over 120 million records with hundreds of users on that single database. They're tiffing, redacting, tweaking layouts and workflows, and doing all sorts of searching, and it's still a very responsive system. So this drop-down up here controls what we call views in Relativity. And views control workflow and a bit of reporting in general, but three things specifically. They're going to control the columns at the top here, what we use to pull back the records, and then the default sort order. So right now we're looking at a view that has responsiveness and issues. But if I was a first-pass reviewer, I'd be locked down to a review like my unreviewed documents. You'll notice here that responsiveness is the only issue that we need to fill in. So at this point, we might even automate some workflow. As records are coded and tagged as responsive, they'll automatically flow into the second tier review. Another question we often get is about priv logs in Relativity, and this is as easy as setting up a view. So we have all our documents here that have been tagged as privileged and agree to be reported on. So we'll take a math action. From here, we have the option to do a CSV or DAT file, but we'll keep it Excel, and we want it to be Unicode. We'll run this, and we'll have our priv log at the bottom of the page here. And at this point, we have the option to manipulate it or save it, do whatever we please. So that is going to be views in Relativity. Are there any questions before we move on? Now I'm going to dive into an actual document. We'll select AS01. This is the core reviewer interface inside of Relativity. Note that at any time I can select this link to return to the document list. At the top right here, we have some different options for configuring our display. We can show or hide our document list during review. We can undock our document for multi-monitor review. We can also swap our coding pane from the right to the left. Here we have an indicator of which file we're reviewing. In this case, we're looking at AS01. And the next to that is a visual indication of what type of file we're reviewing. This envelope lets me know I'm looking at an email. This icon here is a collaboration tool. I can email a link of this specific document out to my team. When I click this, it'll fire up the email on my local machine, throw the control number of the document in the subject and a link inside the body, and send it out. Now, when my reviewers select that link, they're going to need to authenticate inside of Relativity. They'll need to have access to Relativity, the specific case, and the specific document. Otherwise, the link will be useless to them. To the left, we have our different radio buttons. Right now, we're looking at the native file viewer, but I'll come back to that in just 1 minute. We can also view a TIFF image of our document. And this is whether we're tipping on the fly in Relativity, if it's a paper-based collection that's been scanned and coded ahead of time, or if it's a smaller electronic collection that made sense to go to TIFF before review. We can view the extracted text or OCR of the document. And lastly, every time we produce a copy, we're going to store it alongside the original for quick, easy reference. But I'll come back to this a little bit later on in the demo. So we're looking at our native file viewer. And we can give users the speed and control that they're used to in a TIFF-based review without the time and cost normally associated with conversions. Relativity lets users interact with native files in richer ways than they would be able to in other systems that convert to low-resolution TIFF or HTML behind the scenes. For instance, we can go ahead into our document and copy text. We can run relativity analytics, the keyword or concept search. We can do categorization and clustering features right within the application. You'll also note the terms relativity and document are already keyed out for us. This is a concept inside of relativity known as persistent highlights. And what this allows us to do is have a pre-configured list of terms already keyed out for your reviewers without them having to perform a search for those terms. You'll also note that these terms are color-coded for instant contextual recognition. So magenta could be a keyword, and green could be a key player in the case. To the left, we have our persistent highlight tree. And this is where you can control these terms on a term or set level. Next up, I'm going to shuffle through a variety of different document types so you can get an idea of how they render in the native file viewer. So first up, we're looking at an Excel spreadsheet. And you'll notice this additional native radio button at the top here. This wasn't available in the previous email because this option allows us to view the document in our native application. Now, in the previous email, we didn't allow this because this could open up the possibility of read receipts or accidental forwards. But since spreadsheets don't share those same risks, we made the file type accessible in its native application for users who've been granted the rights to access it. So depending on the security requirements of the case or user, we can really lock down the system. You can prevent users from downloading a file, saving a file as a PDF, and copying text from the viewer. So if you have a security-sensitive client that doesn't want any information to escape a contract reviewer's workstation, we can provide that level of security. So also notice I still maintain some control over my document. I can resize columns, and we also have persistent highlighting turned on. So let's say we performed a search for relativity. Rather than having to scroll through the thousands of rows of Excel, I can utilize these blue arrows up here. And when I do that, it'll take me to the different instances of my search term, and it'll have it keyed out for me. The next document is a PowerPoint presentation. We still have that persistent highlighting turned on. We can utilize our blue arrows, and it will take us through the various slides where our hits occur. Next is a document in Korean. Relativity is completely Unicode compliant, so we can load, search, and display foreign languages, double byte languages, and CJK characters. We can get that persistent highlighting, we can do tagging and coding, we can copy text from the viewer, and we can submit it to a search engine. We can TIFF all of these. You get all the same functionality that we get with English language documents, and it's available for foreign language documents as well in Relativity. And then last but not least, one of the pain points of native file review is that sometimes we get some embedded data that isn't always evident to the viewer, such as track changes or comments. So what we can do is configure Relativity to throw up an alert and let our reviewers know. So this alert says, document contains track changes and comments. Please view the image for this record to see the hidden content. So go ahead and press OK and switch to the image of my document. When we do that, we were able to TIFF this image on the fly in Relativity with those track changes and comments included, and I can make any decisions on this that I need to from here. Are there any questions or comments about Relativity's native file viewer before we look at redacting and annotations in Relativity? Let's say I'm doing a native file review and I have the need to redact my document. This toolbar up top here is going to house all of our highlighting and redaction options in Relativity. So I go ahead and start. We have the classic yellow highlight, but we also have a few other color options in our color palette. So I'll select blue and drag it across Relativity. We also have a variety of redaction options. So I'll start with this black one. When we draw it on, you'll notice that transparency mode. I also have a text redaction. And if we right-click, we'll have a pre-configured list of terms set out for our reviewers. They're also Unicode compliant, but they can go ahead and select Edit and create custom text if they'd like to. We also have the option to resize our font if it's too large or too small. Next, I want to hide this address down here, but I don't want to show that I've actually drawn on a redaction. So I'll utilize our white borderless redaction. I also have the option to select multiple redactions, and I can quickly drag their location across the page. Now if I go a couple pages into my review, I can do an inverse redaction, and this will redact everything on the page except this first paragraph. If I go to my last page, I have the option to do a full page redaction, so I can select this black one, but I eventually want to print this document, so I can select a more printer-friendly cross redaction. I also have the ability to apply this redaction to multiple pages, so I can select my cross, and I can apply it to pages 2 and 4. But I also have the option to apply it to all pages in my document. So if I go to page 2, we'll see that full page redaction just like we wanted. I also have the option to do a mass deletion. Maybe I've made some mistakes with my redactions or highlights. I can delete whatever I need to, and I can do it on certain pages, all pages, whatever I need to do. You'll also note that we have the option to toggle our redactions into transparency mode, and this is great for QC before production, but we also have the option to completely hide our redactions. Now, if you look down at the bottom left of the screen, we have this drop-down labeled Attorney. I can go ahead and select Expert, and this will swap me to a clean slate of the document that we were just working with. And this is a concept inside of Relativity known as markup sets. And this allows our reviewers to create secure subsets of documents. Now, our clients use these in a variety of different ways, the first being what you're seeing here. We have attorneys coming in, they're redacting, they're doing work on documents. But then you also have your experts coming in, and you don't want them to interfere with the attorney work product or vice versa. So what we can do is lock that expert down to a markup set. They won't be aware that they're locked down, and this drop-down will not exist to them. And this just helps build and maintain those ethical walls inside the system. In other situations like IP litigation, it's often multi-jurisdictional, so you could utilize these markup sets to send out copies to jurisdiction A, jurisdiction B, jurisdiction C, whatever you need to do. There's no limit to the amount of markup sets you can have. You'll also note this icon here. This is our markup navigation, and this is going to allow reviewers to jump from annotation to annotation, and it just lays out here what type of annotation it is, what page it's on, what markup set. It just allows them to quickly navigate through the document. So are there any questions about redacting or markup sets before we go on to take a look at tagging and coding? So now I'm going to jump back to our first record in our database and talk a little bit about tagging and coding. So you'll notice on the right side of the screen we have what we call layouts in Relativity. And layouts are web-based forms for storing the bibliographical data and metadata about a record, as well as the tagging and coding structure used by the review team. They are highly customizable and completely securable from user to user and group to group. Now right now I'm logged in as a power user, so you'll see that I have a whole host of coding forms available to me here. But we'll go ahead and take a look at coding here. So coding appears to be concerned with a lot of issue tags, but if I swap to my first pass review, this is a very limited amount of bibliographical data. So if I was the first pass reviewer, I'd probably be locked down to this coding form, and I wouldn't see all the others on my list here. I'm only going to see forms that include the decisions I need to make. We have another form for all fields, and this shows read-only metadata about our record. And then we have another for assigning documents. And lastly, one for authoring our priv log. So I'm going to go back to our coding form here. And here we can place rules on these layouts to ensure the quality and consistency of the review. So for instance, I can make a field read-only, like our control number and custodian here. And even though I'm in edit mode, I can't edit these fields. This orange bar here means that a field is required throughout Relativity. So for this particular coding form, it looks like responsiveness is a required decision. So if I were to uncheck any of the values here, I'm automatically going to get a little warning that says this field is required, and I'm going to have to make a decision before moving on to the next document. Also set up are propagation rules. So let's say I tag a record as privileged, and I want that designation to automatically propagate to any other member of this record's family or any duplicates in the system. Then we have our copy from previous rule up here, and this allows users to copy the coding decisions from one document to the next before saving. And this is particularly useful when batches of documents are assigned out to reviewers based on conceptual similarity. Quite often in this situation, the documents will be coded the same. We can also set up some advanced logic on these to enforce best practices and workflow rules. So maybe in this particular review, there's a rule that says, at this stage, a record cannot be tagged as both privileged and responsive at the same time. So if I were to try to save this, we're going to get a little warning here that says document cannot be marked as responsive and privileged. So I'm going to have to go ahead and change that before I make any other decisions. Additionally, we can set up a requirement for your reviewers to pick a deeper determination of something. So let's say privileged, we want them to select attorney, client, work product, or they're not sure. If they were to try to save without any of that, they're going to get another warning, a privileged subtype must be selected for privileged documents. Additionally, we can set up rules that explain designations. So maybe if we have a user select the super hot tag, we're going to require them to leave a comment letting us know why they selected that designation. Even further, if they were to select that the document is in Fuego, we would enforce that comment, and then we would also send a link out to the partner on the case saying, hey, this document has been tagged as in Fuego. Here's the link. You might want to take a look. Some review platforms are going to let you tag a record as reviewed, but we can set up some smart criteria to manage that process. So maybe responsiveness, confidentiality, and privilege have all been addressed. We can automatically have the document flagged as reviewed and shot off to a second-tier reviewer. So really what we're trying to do here is give you the tools to sit down with the case team, come up with the best practices workflow for review, and then solidify and automate those features. Then everyone has the decisions, documents, information that they need in a very fluid and automated way without a ton of extraneous noise in the way that doesn't really concern them. So are there any questions about layouts and relativity? I'm going to finish up the core reviewer interface by talking about our related items pane. And this is where we can put different relational groupings about our record. So right now I'm showing the different family groupings of our record. So here we have that original email, and then we have all the attachments to that email. So that Excel spreadsheet, the PowerPoint presentation, that document that was in Korean, and then the document with those track changes and comments. So let's say that I don't have propagation rules turned on for family groups, but I know that all these records are responsive. So what I can do is take a mass action on these documents. And from here, I can go ahead and label them as responsive, and then I would hit save. Next, we can look at the duplicate information about our record, and this table is fully customizable. So right now, we're showing control number and location, but instead of location, maybe we could change it to show the privilege designation because we want to do a quick QC of how duplicates and near duplicates of privileged documents are being coded in the system. We also have a full audit history of user action in the system, and this is whether documents were viewed, updated, who did it, when they did it, how they did it. Did they maybe use one of the propagation rules we talked about, or did they directly edit the record? I can go ahead and click on duplicates here, and we can get a breakdown of all the actions. I also have the option to filter on those actions. So maybe I'm curious only about updates made to the system. So I'll select update, and we can see all of those here. And we also have a full production history inside of Relativity, so we can see all the productions that AS01 was associated with. We can see the dates they were produced, the beginning and ending Bates numbers. So let's say I'm looking here at my history, and I can see the Acme production was produced in September of 2008, and I'm curious about it. I can just go up to my Productions Radio button here, and it'll pull down my Acme production. So I can see my documents marked confidential. I can see there's a few redactions on the pages, and then we also have that unique Bates number at the bottom. And at this point, maybe I'm curious about the Chicago production too. It was produced roughly a year later. So I would go to my drop-down, select the Chicago production, and it would pull that up for me, and right away I can see the differences between the two documents. This one's not confidential, the redactions have changed, and then again that unique Bates number at the bottom of the page. So really, this is just going to allow us to set up various productions. We can see them quickly and easily and the differences between those without having to set up a convoluted workflow. So are there any questions about the core viewer interface? Core viewer interface, I want to show you how you can use Investigate and search through your documents. Using Relativity Analytics, we can expand our search to find related keywords in similar documents. For example, let's say we're defending Enron in a financial fraud case, and we just received what we expect to be the first of many documents collections, a little over 77,000 records. From an investigative standpoint, one of the first things I want to do is find the documents that are going to help me build our facts of the case and learn what really happened. Now, I've got some keywords that my team has agreed are important to start with, but one of the limitations with keyword searching in a case like this is we don't always have insight into the insider terms that will lead us to the actual fraud. Rather than just run a keyword search for a single term or spend a bunch of time trying to construct some elaborate keyword search from scratch, I can take an important keyword I already know about it and use relativity to build upon it. So a term my team and I have decided is important to this case is the term arrangement. So I can use Relativity Analytics to expand on this term. When I expand, I'm going to get a list of terms that are contextually correlated to the term arrangement. And since this is a financial case, I can see how the terms arrangement, co-investment, and vehicles would make sense, but other terms like LJM and LJM2 don't make immediate sense to me. So if I select this term, it'll take me to a list of terms that basically define it for me. So I don't know how familiar you are with the Enron case, but LJM was incorporated as a co-investment company along with the CFO of Enron, Andrew Fastow, and LJM2 on the Cayman Islands. And that's a well-known tax haven. And this was under the guise of being a partnership. But in reality, LJM was a vehicle to write off billions in dollars of losses to make Enron look a lot more profitable than it actually was. So I can take these terms, I'll copy them into my DT search engine. I'll add our word arrangement. Now I can run a search for all these terms we've uncovered. So when I run my search, you'll see that we were able to narrow our universe of documents down from about 77,000 records to 1,100 records that we can easily dig into. So at a high level, I may want to look for any trends in the data that might exist. So let's add a widget. I'm going to add a widget based on sent date. When our widget pops up, we have a couple options. We can resize our widget, and we can also drag to reposition our widget, so on list. So looking at not much happened in August and May, but there's a spike in our data in June 2000, and that spike continues along the data set. This is an interactive graph, so I'll select the June 2000 bar. And something to note over on the right, every time that we filter down on our data, we're going to have those results show up here. So if I want to drill even further, this is where I would add more filters and group them into search logic groups. But looking back here, when we selected the June 2000 bar, we were able to narrow our results down to 30 documents. And these documents will include those search terms and that month, June 2000. So looking at my subject types, this blue dog jumps out at me immediately. It's in all caps and it seems a little out of place. So I'll select this document to get a better look. We can see we have an internal correspondence between Enron employees, and they're discussing the subject of blue dog. Other than that, this email doesn't tell me much. So I'm going to highlight this group of text here and ask Relativity Analytics to find conceptually similar documents. Those results will show up in our related items pane over here. And if I scroll through my results, this blue dog change order jumps out at me. One, because I'm still trying to figure out the contractual relationships between LJM, LJM2, and Enron. And two, whenever there's a change order, that means there's a pretty substantial change to an existing contract. So I'll take a look at this a little bit further. We can see we have another internal correspondence between Enron employees. And I can utilize my blue arrows to skim through the email based on my search terms. So we can see here that ENA, Enron North America, is scheduled to purchase turbines from LJM this week, and LJM would like Enron to sign a change order by Friday. If we go a little further, we can see LJM needs to sign approval modifications for over $500,000. And lastly, we can see there's a request for Cheryl Costa to double-check her copy of the Blue Dog contract. So this document intrigues me because there's an apparent conflict of interest between LJM, LJM2, and Enron. I have a few options. I can ask Relativity Analytics to find similar documents, but there's something I've noticed throughout my review. A lot of these documents belong to the custodian K-man. So this probably means he's a key player in the Blue Dog arrangement. In order to look into this a little deeper, I'm going to add a logic group. I'll search on my custodians. I'll add K-man. And we can drag our search terms into the logic group. And when we perform our search, it's going to return documents based on the sent date range, but also documents that are owned by the custodian K-man. So we get an increase here to 451. Now, I also have the option to refer to these documents a little bit later, and I can make sure members of my team are able to see and work with them as well. So I'll go ahead and save my search. I'll save this as Blue Dog, make it a public search, and save it to my searches. So at this point, I have a few options. I can edit my search, I can email it out to my team, and then I can continue working on my investigation. But as you're able to see, we were able to use keyword and concept searches together to very quickly locate our documents and help us understand the facts of the case. Are there any questions about searching?